Hi, and welcome to episode 13 of Metastatic Modernity. I'm Tom Murphy, and I'll address in this installment how we are a species out of context as we continue our journey to provide a high-altitude perspective on modernity. A species out of context is one of many aphorisms from Wes Jackson, founder of the Land Institute in Kansas. I highly recommend this book by Bob Jensen that captures many of Wes's profound insights. The book is, I think, masterfully organized and takes the reader on a valuable journey. I've been toying with the use of the word genius in non-cerebral contexts, which drives some people crazy, and that means it's working. But plants and animals are genius in so many ways, doing things we don't have the faintest clue how to do. They know how to survive in a world of curveballs, when to bloom, when and how to grow and shrink their brain, as in the case of chickadees. It's countless clever tricks that life has accumulated through the ages, and species are put to the test every second of every day. Those still with us are proven test takers, passing again and again for millions of years. And that's because they are in their ecological context. They've evolved into a rich set of relationships with other life, and so they're deeply integrated as part of a whole, like we discussed in chapter 4, episode 4, and that's what I mean here by context. Now, humans do have an ecological context as animals filling an evolutionary niche in relation to the rest of the community of life. I mean, that's how we got here in the first place, in a fully ecological context. We didn't just pop in fully formed with no heritage. But we jumped the rails when we tried a new experiment in the form of intensive agriculture. Prior to this, we'd often practice horticulture, tending to what's already present in context. But then we forged into uncharted territory, utterly untested in ecological and evolutionary terms. Now recall that those forces act on very long timescales, so judgment has not yet passed as to whether or not this works. Meanwhile, we separated ourselves from the original ecological context and now find ourselves squabbling over how best to live on this planet. That's because we're making it all up in our heads. I mean, we're ecologically adrift. Our brains evolved as versatile tools to understand the cycles of nature as related to plants and animals, to track animals and read their stories in the dirt, and to interact as social animals, depending completely on group health for survival. But this versatility was also able to turn its attention and considerable power to agriculture, rectilinear artificial environments, and magnificent stunts. The problem is these constructs have no long-term vetting in an ecological context. Our brains don't contain the whole world, and despite that being a common and inverted delusion. So they're incapable of considering the whole in all its tangled complexity. Why then would their fabrications, largely ignorant of ecological interconnections, happen to mesh ecologically? Well, they don't. It's not even close. I mean, the tension between modernity and ecology should come as no surprise. In a way, it's kind of one giant elaborate brain fart, if you'll pardon my language. I mean, compare modernity to evolution's method of slow and steady testing over millions of years, all in this complex, interconnected, ever-present set of relationships that are in fact co-evolving with each other. Our brain schemes really hardly stand a chance against that kind of powerful and proven wisdom of deep time. Whether talking about modes of living, our contraptions, our political or economic systems, our fabrications have not stood the test of time. They flashed onto the scene without evolutionary vetting. They do not participate in deeply integrated reciprocal relationships with the community of life. Our fabrications use bizarre materials that must be mined, which, by the way, is a sure sign of non-ecological behavior. They lack the grace, elegance, and resilience of living species. Our creations corrode, break, become junk and poison that no living thing wants. Modernity's creations basically have no place in the living world, failing to find a role in reciprocal relationship, in a word, unsustainable. Now, I used this metaphor in episode 6 of launching off a cliff. The flight is exhilarating, fun. It's an amazing spectacle to behold. It sure feels like flying, but temporarily. And without having been built on the principles of ecological sustainability, it has no choice but to fail. There's not going to be some magical levitation as our ecological ignorance leads to rapid erosion of the foundations of life. And all this spectacular Whiz-Bangery has produced a lot of diehard fans, and they don't want to hear that it's a temporary stunt. I mean, it's certainly real enough at the moment, and our living on this sort of upswing seems very convincing, but don't be fooled. We have to break the spell. I mean, yes, we've witnessed an incredible spectacle, but our lives are very short on this upward swing, and the spectacle can't do a marathon. Like a fireworks show, it ends. So lots of things are possible on a temporary basis. I mean, inheritance spending produces a whole different lifestyle than working for a living. And just because you see it with your own eyes doesn't mean that it's a long-term reality. The most sinister trap here is pride, that we did this. We remade the world to suit our tastes. Human supremacism, discussed in the last episode, leads us to reject the very ecological context that got us here in the first place and remains vital to longevity on this planet. The ecological nosedive covered in episode 7 demonstrates the peril that we're facing. And in addition to this, we have climate change and aquifer depletion, resource exhaustion, escalating health crises. How many alarm bells have to ring before we recognize the danger? And sadly, you're not going to hear complaints from the plants and animals that are struggling to keep a foothold in this changing and topsy-turvy world. They'll simply keep trying their best as populations fail through no fault of their own. They might not have a mental model for what's going wrong, but they darn sure know it's not right. Okay, I didn't anticipate that one being so intense until I put the slides together. The outline seemed a bit more innocuous, but in any case, next time we'll get to the namesake of this series and compare modernity to metastatic cancer. As always, I encourage you to find the more carefully crafted written companion to this video at the Do the Math blog, dothemath.ucsd.edu. Okay, until next time.